And good morning and welcome. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened. Pray, believing. And belief is not enough. Spiritual power, too, is needed. And then, of course, the fickle and restless mind. And how these things are all interwoven is, of course, the topic for today. And it's very interesting to me that oftentimes when I'm given a topic at Sunday service, that life imitates spirit, maybe, is the way to say it. In other words, there's always something that seems to be going on in my life that tends to bring home the various messages. And I remember years ago when I first was learning to meditate, and the couple who were teaching me beginning meditation made what I thought was an incredibly naive statement. They said, through the technique of Hang Sa, you can still your mind. And I did everything I could not to laugh out loud, because it was just like, you don't know my mind. I mean, it's just, and we all have that same experience. I've recently had a student, and how do the mind is just so restful, restless, and how do I stop the mind? And of course, the lament was that person alone had that challenge. But we all have that challenge one way or another. The other part of that observation is that over years of practicing meditation, I had an experience this week that helped me to understand how powerfully we really can still our minds. And it happens gradually. In other words, I don't currently look at my mind and say, oh, it's relatively still. It just is what it is. It's normal to me at this point. But I had an experience that literally just kind of rocked me. And instead of just a little passing ripple across the consciousness of peacefulness and calmness, there was a darn whirlpool that just kept sucking me under and throwing me up and sucking me under and throwing me up. And it's like, all right, this is what it's like to have the mind and the emotions grab a hold of you strongly again and again and again. So there I was, facing something. It all started relatively benignly. The night before, the Cubs had won the World Series, and my mom sent me, for those of you who are Cub fans, go ahead and cheer, but my mom sent me this little note, and it was a little text message, and she just said, oh, now that the World Series is over, what will I watch? Which is cute in itself, because she was being tongue-in-cheek. She doesn't watch a lot of TV, but she was having fun watching the World Series. But tagged underneath that was a little statement that made me raise my eyebrows and go, what did I miss? Because what it said was, Patty's going in for surgery today. Patty's my sister-in-law, and I didn't know she was going in for surgery. So I kind of went, what did I miss? I'd seen Patty just a few days before at her daughter's wedding. Not a word, no idea that this was happening. And so I called my mom, because this is one of those things where you don't want to just be texting back and forth. It requires a conversation. I says, what did I miss? She goes, oh, no. They were kind of keeping it quiet, because, of course, a loving mother would want the focus of her daughter's wedding to be her daughter's wedding, not what's happening for her. And so they kept it quiet. Only a few people were aware that this was a possibility for a few days later. And I said, okay. And she goes, but, they think it's fairly straightforward. It'll be, an in and out procedure, nothing to worry about. So she didn't want to worry her family unnecessarily. Well, okay, I can understand that. And so, a little ripple. And it's like, all right, I can go with that. I understand. I've been in that position. I know what that is like, to not want to trouble people unnecessarily because you think you have a handle on it. And so I sent a little text message to Patty and my nieces and just said, I'm praying for you and thinking of you and sending my love. And then I asked my niece to tell me how it's going, because I knew at that point they were already at the hospital and there was no point in trying to talk to them and distract them. So later on in the day, I get this little text message from my niece, and she says, surgery is over. It took a little longer than they expected. Again, not too much to worry about with that. Just a little longer, and surgeries often go a little longer than you expect. And so I thought, okay, and again, back to the relative stillness of my mind. There was a little ripple there. And then, maybe an hour later, another text came. And she said, well, it's different than they first thought. Because Patty went in thinking she'd have a lumpectomy and that it would take care of everything. But when they did the surgery, instead they did a full mastectomy. And not only did they do that, but they found cancer in the lymph nodes, which of course opens up a whole new ball game for any of you who have had loved ones who have faced the test of cancer. And so suddenly, instead of something simple and easy that was just, handleable that day, in, out, done, nobody needs to know, now she's facing the possibility of radiation and chemo and whatever fight that takes. So the ripples hit. Not just a few little ripples, but it was just like, oh my goodness. Because, first of all, you get the news, a few hours of time. This isn't a very long period of time. Okay, she's going in for surgery. Okay, it's no big deal. It's done a little longer, and now you get the rest of the story. And many of you know that my brother passed away earlier this year. And the sister-in-law is the wife of my brother. And the nieces and nephew are the ones who just recently lost their father. And so when that hit me, that they were facing this serious consequence potentially for their mother, my heart just went racing out to them and just, in compassion and love and just, the whole thing that occurs because your mind and your heart grab a hold. And of course, the other part was my own grief at my own recent loss. And so all these things were swirling around and kicked up. And I'm watching this. Luckily, through many years of meditation, I didn't just get caught in the whirlpool. It was partly just the observer of the whirlpool as well. I'm watching this happen, and it's like, well, got a choice. I can let the whirlpool take over, or I can practice the teachings. I can become single-pointed and focus my prayer. And it was a constant struggle. I was at the office at the time. I'm trying to pay bills and do other little things like that. And, you pull out a bill and you see the amount and you start to write the name of the company it's going to. And in the process of that, you forget what the name of the company is. You look again. Literally, it was the hardest little thing. You finally get the bill written, sign your name on it, and then, I have to mail it. So you get a letter and you start to address it and you can't remember what the company is again. So you look it up and you go back and then you think you're done. You've sealed the letter that the check is in and then go, oh, whoops, need a stamp. So you see all these little tiny things were being impacted because of the whirling emotions just under the surface. And I kept fighting, that. So I said, okay, no, I'm not going to go with that. And I would draw my mind to the point between the eyebrows, and I'd fill my heart with God's love and light and send that prayer out to my family members. And I was like, okay, I can focus again. But it was amazing to me how often, how fast, I had to go back and refocus. Go back and refocus. Go back and refocus. You can say it with me. Go back and refocus. We know this game. We've done it over and over and over again. But for me, it was intriguing to watch because it made me appreciate the fact that over the 20, 30 years of meditation, that there had been a change in my consciousness. There had been a stillness that had become more of a stillness anyway, than had been my previous norm. And so it was incredibly uncomfortable to go back to the surface of the waves and into the jostling of all of that. And I was so relieved to be able to go home, because at least when I was at home, I didn't have any other duties that I had to do. I didn't have to pick up the phone or help somebody who walked in the temple or whatever it was. I could just focus on diving deep and going back into the stillness of God, reconnecting with love and divine. And then from that point, sharing my prayer. And so it's very helpful for us to remember, no matter how many times we get distracted, regardless of what the distraction is. Because I remember the early years of learning to meditate, and it wasn't outward experiences that would sometimes rock me. It was my own darn thoughts just rambling around in there, and so it's like, okay, let's hopefully is a little bit more done than it used to be. But now it's outward things that we still have to deal with and address. And of course, life happens, things happen, and they rock us. The trick is to go back to God as closely and as quickly as you can. And this, of course, is not an experience unique to me. And the other part of it is that during the wedding, Patty had asked specifically for the few people in her family who knew of the upcoming surgery not to say anything, which is one of the reasons I didn't know until the day of the surgery. But her mother, a very devout and faithful woman, decided that her daughter needed some help. And she believes in prayer. She lives prayer. She is a very wonderful, deep, devout person. And so, again, as a loving mother, she decided that sending and asking people who she knew were also deeply devout and connected to prayer to pray for her daughter. And so she told a few people. And unfortunately for us, later on in the evening, some of those people approached Patty and said, and Patty was just horrified, that they were asking her at this event. And she went home the next day and had a little talk with her mom and said, "What's up with that? I told you not to tell anyone." And she just looked at her daughter calmly and she said, "Patty, you can't do this alone. You cannot do this alone. You need prayer. And you need the prayer support and love of the people around you to hold you in divine grace." And, Patty relaxed a little bit about that idea because she knew her mom was sincere with that. Her mother's perspective of religious devotion is different than my sister-in-law's is. It's considerably deeper, but she respects it. And so she said, "Okay, Mom, we'll let people pray for me." And I have no idea how this will turn out, and that's not the part of the story that's interesting. The fact of the matter is this woman who has lived her life, this is her mother Anne, 70, 80 years of life lived believing deeply. Now, not just believing, because belief is not enough. You need the power and the concentration and the one-pointed focus of spiritual magnetism in order to be able to unite your will with the divine will. And then prayer is powerful, far more so than the restless prayers of the desperate mind. God answers all prayers. Restless prayers, he answers a little bit. Deep, sincere, self-offering prayers, where there is no, "You must do it this way, Lord," but just, "What's the highest for this individual? I'm holding them in your divine light and love. Do your will. Let our will unite with your will. Your will be done." But she knows that the power of that. And so here we are, and of course we all have these opportunities in our lives, to join our own will. I will reason, I will, and I will act. But guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right thing in every moment. So here we are, we get to pull the magnetism of divine grace into our lives and be vehicles for that light and love to all. And, it's fun to see the process that happens, because as we know, devotees, oftentimes even those that are very sincere, will go through periods of doubt. They will not feel, they will not believe, they have no faith, they've lost it for whatever reason. And if you've been fortunate enough not to have ever lost your faith or your belief, count yourself incredibly lucky. But if you've ever gone through that struggle, it is really hard to get yourself back. And the only thing you can really do is cling all the more determinedly to God. It's the only real answer. So even if you normally have had an experience of divine love filling your heart, or you've been in the divine light and you know that as a truth, it's an experience that you've trusted. There's no doubt at that point when you have an experience like that. But interestingly enough, life intrudes, thoughts intrude, emotion intrudes, and we lose that connection. And then we wonder, is God real? Am I just wasting my time trying to meditate, trying to connect with the divine? It's a very real question. It comes up over and over, and my heart just goes out to the individuals who raise that question, because you know from your own experience as devotees and truth seekers how painful that is when you lose that connection, when you lose the knowledge, the truth that God exists. devastating. And then what do? You cling more determinedly to God. It's the only choice you've got. And one of the things, there's this beautiful story, many of you have heard it, and it's a story about a lion sheep. Not lying sheep, but lion, roar, sheep. And the story goes that this little lion cub, the mother, heavily pregnant, was hungry, chasing a flock of sheep, and she catches a lamb for dinner. In the process of that, she's unaware to herself, gives birth to the lion cub. She takes her dinner off into the jungle. The lion cub is left with the sheep. And there's this little newborn lion cub laying in this flock of sheep. And of course, the sheep at first are traumatized by the fact that this event has occurred, and they're trying to get recombobbled again after being chased by a lion and losing one of their members. And then they see this lion cub laying in the meadow. And one mama sheep has pity on this poor little newborn, and she raises the lion cub as her own. And she raises the lion cub, and years go by, and the lion becomes full grown, full, big, male lion, and he behaves. Environment is stronger than willpower, so he behaves like a sheep. He does the sheep mannerisms and behaves like a sheep. Well, one day, this flock of sheep with its little lion cub is attacked by another grown male lion. And, nature being what it is, he's just going about getting fed for the day. And he chases the flock, and he sees out in front of the flock, because of course the lion can run faster than the sheep, but he sees this huge lion with its tail raised, and he's bleeding in fear. He's like, what is up with that? What is that lion doing out there running away from me? And it stuns him, so the lion stops his pursuit, and he kind of contemplates what is going on. Now all of his attention is focused on this lion cub sheep, and he stalks the lion cub. And he captures the lion cub, and he looks really hard at him, trying to figure out what's happening. And the little lion cub is going, don't eat me, lion, don't eat me, lion, just terrified and just, piteously crying, as a sheep would do for his life. And the lion's taken aback by that and is wondering what to do. And he gets this inspiration. And he drags the lion cub to a pool of water. And he holds the cub next to the water and, open your eyes, open your eyes, open your eyes. And the lion, no, don't eat me, don't eat me. And finally, the lion cub opens his eyes. And what does he see in the reflection? Well, he sees two of them that look the same, and one's a lion. And he's looking at that reflection, and the lion's trying to wake him up, because, hey, you're a lion. What are you acting like a sheep for? And, the lion cub's starting to kind of wonder if that might be true. And he's looking at it, and he said, well, try roaring. Maybe if you roar, you'll remember who you really are. And as the story goes, the little lion cub tries to roar, but it comes out, a little bleat roar, if you will. A little combination of trying to be something different than he's used to being. And the lion goes, well, you can do better than that. Come on, give it a real roar. And he tries again, not quite successful, and then he tries yet again. So the lion cub, from his belly, the diaphragm, pulling up all that strength and energy, lets out a mighty roar. And he awakens to remember who he really is. And of course, from a spiritual perspective, we are the ones that are the little sheep, lost in something different than what we really are. Because when we dive and we're caught up in the whirlpool of our thoughts and our emotions and the surface, we forget our true divinity. We forget that we are children of the divine, and we are spiritual lions. We don't have to cower down in front of the face of cancer or whatever it might be that our challenge is. We just need to go deeper and to concentrate harder and to focus our attention one-pointedly so that we can attune ourselves to the divine grace that is our birthright. We can be those spiritual lions. Now, in this story of prayer, coming back to that, one of the questions that people ask oftentimes is, well, how do you pray? What's the right way to pray? And, there's this story in the scriptures it's an Indian story, and there's a man who's been diagnosed and he has 3 months to live. And this man had never previously been all that interested in knowing God. And getting this diagnosis, he thought, well, I'm going to hedge my bets. In other words, now I'm going to seek God. May not have paid attention in an earlier part of my life, but now with 3 months to live, I'm going to do my best to find God. And so in this broken temple, as he considered his body, he began to pray and to meditate. And he simply did a simple prayer, Lord, come into this broken temple. Lord, come into this broken temple. And 3 months went by, and he was still alive. So he honored his commitment to continue to seek God. And he continued with this. And over time, he was able to sit in meditation longer and to deepen his prayer. But he still kept saying, Lord, come into this broken temple. And 3 years later, doing his prayer, he's filled with divine light. He is filled and consumed by the light of the divine and the ecstasy that comes with divine contact. And he's just bathed in that light, just astounded by the experience. And when the ecstasy falls away, he discovers that he is healed. And he's a little puzzled by that, and he asks the divine, Lord, I didn't ask you to heal me, I just asked you to come into my broken temple. And the Lord responded, where my light is, there can dwell no darkness. Where my light is, darkness cannot dwell. And he was healed. Now we all have that as our potential if we choose to tune in to the divine light. Over and over and over again, the stories are filled with things of individuals having that. And if you think you have to be part of a scripture or an ancient story or something in order to have that experience, forget about it. Several months ago, I was teaching a meditation class, and a man in the class was, kind of skeptical, shall we say. He was brought to the class by a friend of his, and he decided to honor the friendship by coming. And as we were talking, etc., he started to open up a little bit and share a little bit about himself. And, as part of the concept of meditation, we talk about the idea of we are children of the divine light, and the divine is our birthright, and we can be filled with light and be filled with love and have that experience of peace deep within. And he's looking at me strangely. And he's kind of mulling that over. And eventually I started asking the rest of the class, different experiences that perhaps they had, because most truth seekers have had some awakening of God within them, one way or another. And finally he looks at me and he says, well, I've never really believed in God. I came because my friend asked me to. He says, but I went to another service, and I've been going to services regularly in a particular church that he was fond of. And he says, and one day, I don't know what the minister was talking about, the sermon or anything. It had nothing to do with that. I was just sitting there in the church, kind of my mind was wandering around, hoping to get outside to do whatever I wanted to do in 10 minutes, watching the watch. And lo and behold, what happened? Well, he perceived Jesus right there blessing him. Just right there. No hubbub, nobody going, oh, look at the light over there. It's just his own personal, unique experience. And then he knew in that moment that God was real and that God loved him. And so don't give up hope. Whatever your own personal experience of the divine is, offer your best to God and let it go. But the grace will occur. And of course, the more you can bring the mind and emotions one-pointedly under your control, the deeper you can go into that reality. The deeper you can go. Now, the other question that oftentimes comes up with prayer is, well, what's the right way to pray? I don't know how to pray. How do I pray? What do I have to do? And there's a beautiful story of 3 hermits that lived on an island. And these 3 hermits were very simple people, and they just practiced a particular prayer. Real simple. We are 3, thou art 3, have mercy on us. Have mercy on us. And that's what they said. We are 3, thou art 3, have mercy on us. Now, on this island, oftentimes the fishermen would come and bring supplies to the hermits. In other words, bring them food or shelter or whatever they might need. And so there was an interaction from the mainland with these hermits. And eventually, stories of these hermits started to reach the ears of the local bishop, because the local people were starting to whisper about miracles being performed by these 3 hermits. And so there was a lot more traffic out to the island because people were in need of miracles, and so they were going out there. Now the bishop was kind of puzzled because, these were not ordained priests. They were not even a member of his flock. They knew nothing of the dogma of the church the bishop belonged to. But he thought, well, if miracles are happening out there, I guess I better investigate and, maybe give them my blessing so they can, do it better. So he goes out and visits the island, and he meets with the hermits. And they're very delighted to, a man of God has come to see us. And so they diligently tried to learn the prescribed prayers. Diligently wanted to practice what it was that the church was telling them that they needed to practice. And so after several days, the bishop thinks, okay, I've succeeded. They remember them now. And he gets in the boat, and he's sailing back to the Midland, the mainland. And he looks out at the island, and what does he see but this radiant ball of light? They're on the island, and it's moving across the water towards him, coming closer and closer. And he's captivated by this radiant light, wondering, what in the world is this? And as the light approached him, he could tell it was coming directly to his boat. It made him a little a little bit nervous. He was like, "Oh, what's this?" And then he could discern, in that radiant light, the 3 hermits holding hands, running across the water. Sir, 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 please stop, We've forgotten your prayers. Please tell us your prayers again so that we can practice appropriately. And the bishop's looking at these 3 hermits in radiant light, walking upon the water, and he's humbled. And he says, oh, please, continue the prayer that you've been using. Continue that prayer, because the depth and the sincerity and the love of your heart is what is touching God. And through that touch and that love, God's presence is flowing to others. So if you don't think you know how to pray in the correct way, open your heart. Let love just flow and speak from the love of your heart. And let that devotion grow. Cling to God if you ever have those moments where you doubt the existence. Doesn't matter the experience or lack thereof that you've had. It doesn't matter if the experience came from a story of a saint or a great master of the world, or the person who may be sitting in a chair right next to you. The fact of the matter is we are children of the divine. And through deep prayer, we can align with the divine will. And the interesting thing is, remember I said that God answers restless prayers just a little bit? Well, if we let go and let God, the way that the divine answers our prayers is in ways so much more tremendous than we can possibly imagine. We have this tendency, it's like, okay, do I want to pray for my sister-in-law Patty to be healed? Well, of course, the human part of me wants that. But maybe there's a bigger pattern happening. So let's just give it to God. Okay, I've got restless thoughts. I'm upset about this. Human nature being what it is. Give it over to the divine and let God take care of it. However that might be. whatever it is that might happen there. Because if you've ever lived as a devotee, and you've lived life so that you've had life experiences, birth, weddings, death, etc., you know that there's a longer rhythm that's occurring. And all we need to do is try to remember that we are not this body, that we are children of the divine. And then we can just simply say, however your heart normally says it, God, I love you. I want only God. Not because you might be able to heal my sister-in-law, but because I love you. I love you. And I love that your love flows through me, uplifting and transforming the world. So whether you're one of those hermits that's out in the middle of nowhere, doesn't attend a Sunday service, doesn't know anything about the prescribed method of prayer, offer your heart, offer your love, and go deeper and deeper into that experience. God bless.